Okay, now it's fine. Okay, hello everybody. I'm Marta Ballatore, PhD student at Degree Laboratory. So I'm doing a thesis in economics and management about smart contracts and blockchain from perception point of view. That means that I'm looking at the perception of this technology by end users, but also by ecosystem players such as OEMs, insurance companies, and so on, to understand the potential of this technology in several ecosystems and also the adoption of these technologies. So today I will present a study about the end user's perception of smart contracts in the case of blockchain technology for the insurance sector. So first of all, we know that today there are several advantages that are taken into account when we are deciding how to use the blockchain and why use a blockchain in several case studies. So we know the potential of this technology, but at the same time, we don't have really an idea about the potential perception of this technology by the end users. So for example, we can know that the blockchain and smart contract help us to reduce the uncertainty and also the complexity of transaction exchanges. So for example, from an economic point of view, it's more easy with the blockchain to exchange money than in the real world, but we don't really know if the end users are ready for this changement. Are they ready to change, to move from the real world that now we know to the blockchain-based environment where everything is traceable, everything cannot be modified, and so on. So this is, even if we don't have a lot of information about the user's perception, their perception is fundamental, is a crucial factor for the success of a blockchain technology or other platform based on this technology. But there is a huge problem because we have some methodology to analyze the potential perception of end users, their adoption, and so on. But at the moment, for a lot of case studies based on blockchain, we don't have really a prototype to test or also a stabilized usage to analyze, because we have Bitcoin. So we can have like a common analysis on the adoption of blockchain by end users for the Bitcoin and for the finance sector. But for example, in the insurance sector, in the automotive sector, we don't still have a blockchain that is ready to be put in the market. So that's why in my thesis, we are trying to use experimental economics, that is a methodology, to analyze the potential perception of these technologies, focusing on their characteristics. That means that we are going to analyze what are the behavioral factors, the behavioral traits that everyone have that can incentivize end users to go to the blockchain or to make them averse to this type of technology. And to do that, we use controlled environment. For example, you can see in the picture that there is a network of computers, and there are students coming at the lab playing games, and we just analyze their decision-making process. So we have a lab experiment, and with a lab experiment, we can really replicate the logic of the technology, so the basic characteristic of the technology, to see which behavioral traits can affect the adoption of a future platform based on blockchain and smart contract. So in this case, for this study, we look at the behavioral factors that can affect the end user's perception and consequently the adoption of blockchain-based smart contract in risky decision. So we are, for example, in the insurance company case study. And we focus on the transparency objectivity of blockchain and smart contract as the main characteristics to create our lab experiment. So if we have to do that, to be focused on objectivity and transparency, to see what are the behavioral traits that can be affected by these characteristics, we can look at the insurance industry. Today, we have a tedious and human-based procedure to analyze the car accident, for example. If you took an easy example, the one-sided car accident, we can have information about the accident, and there are experts that are evaluating the dynamics to execute the contract, the traditional contract. So this is also a case study that is based in that is provided by the Smart IoT for Mobility project, and Mr. Verdier talked about it this morning. And so if we have a look at the case study, we can have a car that have an accident, and we can have a connected car. So we have a lot of data about the car accident, and also behavioral data, how the driver was driving at the moment of the accident, he was sleeping, it was like 3 hours no-stop driving. So we can collect all this data, and we can give them, for example, to experts to evaluate them and to execute the contract, or we can give them to a smart contract that, based on the clauses of the contract, will, for example, decide the refund. If the refund will be higher if there was a good behavior during the accident, when the accident occurred, or if there was like a bad behavior that can be the cause of the accident. So in this case, we see that with a smart contract, we have already all the clauses and also the process of the smart contract in the blockchain. So we can go to the blockchain, look at the smart contract, and we have we can have an idea about the process of all the data. So that means that we are in a risky situation. On the other hand, when we have experts, we don't really have the possibility to go to look at the mind of the experts and to know what they are thinking, how they are processing information. We have really a black box. So our lab experiment is focused on that, the transparency and reduced complexity of smart contract versus the black box of experts. And to analyze which are the behavioral factors that can be impacted by this changement, the switch from uncertainty to risk, we have several notions from experimental economics. First of all, we have risk. So that means that we have all the information to understand and to calculate the probability of an outcome. So we are in the case of a smart contract. We have all the information, and we can know I have the probability of 90% to be evaluated by the smart contract and so on. And then we have the ambiguity. The ambiguity is when we are not able to evaluate the probability. So it's the uncertainty, because we have an expert, the black box, so we don't know what's really happening in his mind. And also we have the reduction to compound lottery. That means it's another level of a complexity. For example, we have several steps that we have to analyze the probability, and probably we are not able to calculate the probability because it's too complex to calculate them. So we can, for example, look at that as a urn. We have a urn with 10 balls, orange and blue. In the risky situation, we know that there are 5 blue balls and 5 orange ones. So we are able to calculate the probability. In the ambiguity one, we know that there are orange and blue the balls, but we don't know the number of orange balls and the blue one. And in the reduction to compound lottery, it's like 2 steps. In the first steps, I know the probability, but if it's blue, I will go to the step 2B. And if it's red, I go to the steps 2A. So I can calculate the probability of all the outcomes, but it's really complex, and it makes me feel probably averse to this complexity, because I have to do more calculation, I have to wait for 2 urns and so on. So this is a way to reduce the complexity of the real environment in a lab experiment, to just focus on the decision making, and to be able to say, okay, we have these behavioral factors that can be important for our case studies, for our products, for others experiments, but also to launch it in the market with a good promotion. So in our case, as I said, the risk is the smart contract. We have all the information, and the ambiguity and the reduction to compound lottery are used together to replicate the expert-based procedure. So we used a mixed methodology. That means that we sent questionnaires to our subjects, and then we ran a lab experiment. And the pre-questionnaire was just to look at the role of social demographic variables, and also personality traits, such as the generalized trust, that is the propensity to give trust to others, and the optimism. For example, I'm an optimist or not in several uncertainty situation, and so on. And the most important one in the experience of the car. So if I have experience with the car, which is the impact of this experience on my behavioral traits, and the impact of these behavioral traits in my propensity to use smart contracts. So in the lab experiment, we used, instead of yours, as we saw before, we use a deck of cards, but there are 20 cards, and 19 blue and 1 red card. Then the 1 red card, we can see it like a bad behavior during the accident. And if we pick the red card, okay, sorry, we saw that you had a misbehavior, so you will not be refunded, or will be refunded less. So this is just to give you an idea about the real simplification that we have in a lab experiment, because there are just tables and they have to take a decision. In this, for example, they have to decide if they prefer to go to play a urn, to play a game with 10 cards, or 14, 16, so there is a more chance of getting the red car, but at the same time the payoff is higher. So to look if they are averse to the risk or not, if they love the risk. We have the same for the ambiguity, for the reduction to compound lottery, and step by step we are able to create a realistic idea of the decision-making process when there is a smart contract or an expert. In this case, we have on the left the smart contract-based procedure, and on the right the expert-based procedure. So if we look, we have students for the experimental design because they are younger. We suppose that they already have the capability to understand the new technologies. They are more used to use new technology and so on. And we look just at the behavioral traits that can impact their choices. So as I said, we use the car experience as a moderator. So that means that is our key variable. And if we look at the results, we see that the experience plays a role. For example, if they are propense to love complex situation, for example, the graph B, if they have an experience with the car, they are more propense to choose the experts. because they love the complexity. They have a behavioral traits that is giving us an information about the propension to love complex situations. So if we look at the results that we have, we can see that potential users with a car experience and low risk loving preferences, they are more willing to loving preferences. They are more willing to embrace a smart contract. So I like risk. I go to the smart contract because it's a risky decision. When they have no experience with cars, so they are not used to the complexity of experts of the car experience and so on. If they don't like this complexity, they go to the smart contracts. So these help us, these several results help us to give a policy recommendation. And for example, if we try to interpret our results, for experienced users, we see that if they love risk, they are more in favor to smart contracts. And there is no impact of the ambiguity because they really know the ambiguity or the uncertainty situation because they are used to use cars and is a complete uncertain scenarios for when we are driving cars. And when we have a look to no experienced users, but in this case, they have no experience with the complexity and also with the ambiguity created by the experience with cars. And so they, if they are averse to ambiguity and to the complexity, they go and they prefer the smart contract because they have all the information and it becomes risk. And for experienced users only, we see also that if they have a negative generalized trust, that means that they are not willing to trust others, they prefer to use a smart contract instead of to trust experts. And also the optimism can play a role in this case studies can be like a counterintuitive results because if I'm optimist, I will go for the smart contracts. But we can see that can be seen as an openness to new technology. So we need more tests to validate this hypothesis. And for the policy recommendation, we can see that for experienced users, it's better to emphasize the ability of smart contracts to clarify the evaluation procedure in the case of a car accident. And they emphasize also that the smart contracts are replacing human third parties. So they will not need to trust experts. And for no experienced users, we need to focus on the aversion to the complexity, to the uncertainty of insurance procedures by showing that the smart contracts is increasing transparency and also predictability. So we can have several policy recommendations depending on the experience of the users. So thank you. I hope that it was easy to understand. And we are running another experiment to evaluate other behavioral traits. So if you want to participate to this experiment, you can send me an email. So to really prove, to really understand how is the experimental economics methodology and to be an active part of the academic research. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. So if you have questions right now in the room, no. I have a question for you, Marta. You have classified your results. In fact, I am very interested in the policy that you have written. In fact, you are able to say that if a company wants to have a smart contract like the Renault company. If we want to have a better adoption of those smart contracts for the insurance, we have to emphasize on certain points. And can you just rapidly say what are the conclusions of your research? And I think that it is probably the most interesting points that you have drawn about the smart contracts and about the classical things. Can you show us the slide that you have? Yes, this one.
No. Okay.
Yeah. Can you have some things to say about these recommendations?
Okay, we have to say that we used a contest-free lab experiment. That means that we were not talking about smart contract and blockchain. And I can explain why, because if we are giving them this information and they are students, so they don't know the technology, it's impossible to control the behavioral traits and also the impact of the characteristic of the technology. That's why we are looking at the logic of the technology to show the potential switch in terms of decision making. So that means that these results can give some tips, but at the same time, we have to do more experiment, for example, with a prototype of technology, and look at the impact of these behavioral traits in a more realistic scenario. So this is what we can have when we don't have at all a prototype. So there are limitations. That's true. But at the same time, in the literature, we see that in the literature of experimental economics, we see that these behavioral traits, they don't really change between all the scenarios. That means that if we are signing a contract for the insurance, or we are playing with friends with a deck of cards at some game, our behavioral traits are not changing. So they can have an impact, a less impact, a higher impact, or no impact at all, but they are still there. So that means that with this policy recommendation, we can already have some inputs to create a good communication around these technologies, because we know that at this moment, when we talk about blockchain technology, everyone thinks about speculation. So this can be a good idea to better explain to potential users the potential of this technology. And at the same time, it can be used for marketing purposes. But as we know, it's better to use this type of results for other trials with the technology when we have a prototype. So we will have a prototype, we will test, for example, socio-demographics variables, for example, if the age have an impact or not, if for younger or older people, but also look at this type of behavioral traits to be sure that the acceptance of the blockchain is not impacted by behavioral traits that we cannot really manage. They are in us, we are made of behavioral traits.
I don't know if you have other questions.
I have one.
Yes.
Yes, I am surprised by the term risk loving. From my point of view, it is more curiosity. And my question is, what do you mean by risk? I will develop a little bit. For me, the blockchain technology gives us a window to provide an alternative to the GAFAMI. If we are able to use it in a good manner and with an ethical manner, with an ethical way, if we are not able to get these windows, the GAFAMI will take it. And this is why I wonder about the term risk, because for me, if one of the GAFA propose a digital solution to do the same thing, and because it is user-friendly, citizens or people prefer this solution, the risk is very big for us in terms of sovereignty, governance, privacy, identity, and a lot of things that I can enumerate. So, so I think you may be more precise of what you mean by risk in your study, in order to qualify this risk in regard of your what you would like to study and to say, in fact.
Okay, when we talk about risk in economy, we are talking about an uncertainty decision event. So it means that we have the information and we can calculate the probability of the occurrence of an outcome. That means that, for example, in our case, the insurance-based smart contract still have technological problem, for example, security risk and so on. And at the same time, we have a contract in the blockchain. So we can prevent, for example, fraud, behavior by the experts. We have these smart contracts. We can see all the information are collected and treated by the smart contract. But at the same time, we know that, for example, the smart contract can be created for 5 sensors that we have in a car, but probably we need a sensor that is the 6th one, and is not collecting information, or is not uploading this information on the blockchain. That means that the smart contract is there. We know all the events that are collected and by these smart contracts. Probably there are some events that are not stored in the blockchain. So that means I can calculate a little bit the probability of the fit and also the performance, because we cannot say that it's a perfect information decision. We have the need to calculate the ability, for example, of smart contract, the success of a smart contract, but at the same time we have the information. And when we talk about risk loving, that means that when we have still a risk in the decision making, there are people that are more prone to take this risk than other ones. We can talk about, for example, the lottery. We can calculate the probability to win a lottery, and we know that is very, very low. But there are some people that are still playing. That means that they love the risk. They love to take risk. And for example, the smart contract is also a new technology, and so there are risks. We know all the information is stored. We cannot change it, but there are risks in the adoption of these smart contracts. but still it's like it could be also a limitation of our study. We are really trying to simplify the use case at the maximum level to extrapolate the main characteristics and focusing on the decision-making procedure. Oh, we have a technical issue. Okay,
no,
that's
okay.
it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Marta. If there is no more questions on the website, I think that we will just have a short break, and we will come back at 16 hours. Yes.
At 4 p.m.
4 p.m. So thank you very much, and we will see us again at 4 p.m.
Thank you.